The deafening whir of helicopter blades cut through the morning calm as the massive military aircraft descended onto the hospital helipad. Staff froze mid-step, coffee cups suspended in air, as three uniformed Navy officers strode purposefully through the sliding doors. "We need Thomas Reeves," the lead officer announced, his voice carrying the weight of national urgency. "It's a matter of national security." The nursing director, who had spent months belittling the quiet single father, stammered, suddenly realizing the man she'd dismissed as just a male nurse was something far more than he appeared. If you're moved by stories of unsung heroes and second chances, hit that like button and subscribe to see more incredible true stories of extraordinary people living among us. Your support helps us bring these inspiring tales to light. Thomas Reeves had always been an early riser, a habit forged through years of pre-dawn military drills that civilian life couldn't erase. At 5:15 a.m., he moved silently through his modest two-bedroom apartment, careful not to wake 8-year-old Emma as he prepared her lunch for school. The peanut butter sandwich was cut diagonally. Emma insisted it tasted better that way, and he tucked a small note inside her lunchbox. "Be brave today. Love, Dad." The morning ritual was sacred to Thomas. After 14 years as a Navy SEAL, these quiet moments grounded him in a way mission briefings never could. He studied his reflection in the bathroom mirror, running a hand over the stubble on his jaw. At 38, the lines around his eyes had deepened, telling stories of squinting against desert sun and ocean spray, of nights spent scanning horizons for threats. His body, once a weapon honed to lethal precision, now served a different purpose. Carrying his daughter to bed when she fell asleep on the couch, lifting patients who couldn't move themselves, holding steady during the long hours of hospital shifts. "Daddy?" Emma's voice, still thick with sleep, called from the hallway. "Are you making pancakes?" Thomas smiled, the tension in his shoulders easing. "It's Tuesday, Pumpkin. Tuesday is pancake day." Emma appeared in the doorway, her dark hair a wild tangle around her face. She had her mother's eyes, deep brown and perceptive. Sometimes when she looked at him, Thomas felt she could see straight through to the parts of himself he tried to keep hidden, even from her. "Can I help flip them?" she asked, already moving toward the kitchen. "Wouldn't have it any other way, Lieutenant," he replied, using the nickname that always made her stand a little taller. As they worked side by side at the stove, Thomas felt the familiar ache in his chest. 3 years since Sarah had died, and still there were moments when the absence of her felt like a physical wound. Emma had been 5 then, too young to fully understand that Mommy wasn't coming back from the hospital. Thomas had been deployed when the call came. Aggressive cancer, discovered too late, spreading too fast. He'd made it home just in time to say goodbye. After the funeral, he'd made the decision that changed everything. He would leave the only life he'd known since he was 18 years old. No more deployments, no more months away from his daughter. Emma needed stability, needed him present. So Thomas Reeves, decorated Navy SEAL with specialized medical training, became Thomas Reeves, RN, working the emergency department at Mercy General Hospital. "Daddy, you're burning the pancake," Emma pointed out, her small face serious. Thomas flipped the pancake to reveal a charred underside. "Tactical error," he admitted. "Good catch." By 7:30, Emma was dressed in her school uniform, backpack ready by the door. Thomas knelt to straighten her collar, a habit Sarah used to tease him about. "Military precision," she'd say, laughing as he aligned the buttons of their daughter's cardigan. "Remember, Mrs. Winters is picking you up today for your play date with Zoe. I'll get you from their house at 7. Emma nodded solemnly. "After your shift?" "I know, Dad." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "That's my girl." The drive to Emma's school was filled with her chatter about the science project due next week and questions about whether they could get a dog, a conversation they'd been having for months. Thomas listened, offering appropriate responses while part of his mind ran through his upcoming shift. Tuesday was often busy in the ER, and they were already short-staffed with 2 nurses out sick. After dropping Emma off, watching until she disappeared through the school doors with a final wave, Thomas headed to Mercy General. The hospital rose before him, a sprawling complex of glass and concrete. 3 years. And still sometimes he felt like an imposter walking through those doors, trading one uniform for another. The emergency department was already humming with activity when Thomas arrived. He nodded to the security guard, swiped his badge at the staff entrance, and headed to the locker room to change into his scrubs. "Well, look who decided to grace us with his presence," came a voice from behind him. Nurse manager Patricia Winters stood in the doorway, arms crossed over her chest. At 52, she ran the ER with military efficiency that Thomas might have appreciated if it weren't coupled with her obvious disdain for him. "I'm 15 minutes early, Patricia," Thomas replied evenly, checking his watch. "That's nurse manager Winters to you, Reeves." Her eyes narrowed. "And I need you to take beds 4 through 8 today." Johnson called in sick again. 5 beds instead of the usual 3 was a heavy assignment, especially in the ER, but Thomas simply nodded. "Got it." Patricia lingered, watching as he changed into his scrubs. "You know, most male nurses I've worked with have something to prove. They're eager. They volunteer for extra shifts. They go above and beyond." Her tone made it clear she found Thomas lacking. "But you, it's like you're just passing through, waiting for something better." Thomas kept his expression neutral as he tied his shoes. He'd faced worse than Patricia Winters in his life. Insurgents with automatic weapons, treacherous mountain passes in Afghanistan, the crushing depths of the ocean during dive missions. Her petty comments barely registered. "I'm here to do my job, Patricia. Nothing more, nothing less." She made a dismissive sound. "That's exactly the problem. This isn't just a job. These are people's lives." As she walked away, Thomas allowed himself a moment of frustration. If she only knew how many lives he'd held in his hands before coming here. How many times he'd performed emergency medicine under fire, with nothing but a med kit and his training between a teammate and death. But that was a life he'd left behind, and he had no interest in using it to impress someone like Patricia Winters. The shift started with the usual morning rush. A construction worker with a nail through his hand, an elderly woman with chest pain that turned out to be severe indigestion, a college student with a migraine so intense she couldn't stop vomiting. Thomas moved between rooms with quiet efficiency, his hands steady, his voice calm as he explained procedures and administered medications. By mid-morning, the pace had picked up. A 3-car accident on the highway brought in multiple trauma patients, and the ER staff moved into the choreographed chaos they knew so well. Thomas was assisting Dr. Patel with a young woman whose arm had been nearly severed when he felt someone watching him. He glanced up to see Dr. Eliza Chen, the newest attending physician, observing his technique as he established an IV line in the patient's remaining good arm, a difficult stick that he'd managed on the first try. "Nice work, Reeves," she said when they stepped away from the patient who was now being prepped for surgery. "Where did you learn to place IVs like that? Most nurses would have needed at least 2 attempts with veins that collapsed." Thomas shrugged. "Just experience." Dr. Chen wasn't satisfied with his answer. "No, that was something else. You have a steadiness under pressure that's rare. Military background?" "Something like that," Thomas replied, already turning toward his next patient. "You know, you could be more than just a floor nurse," she called after him. "With your skills, you could easily—" "I'm exactly what I want to be, Dr. Chen." Thomas cut her off, his tone final. The truth was more complicated. Being a nurse wasn't what Thomas had imagined for his life, but it gave him what he needed most: predictable hours, a stable home for Emma, and the chance to use at least some of his medical training. The pay was significantly less than what he'd made as a SEAL, but it was enough to keep a roof over their heads and food on the table. More importantly, it meant he was home every night to tuck his daughter into bed. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of patients, paperwork, and the occasional barbed comment from Patricia. During his lunch break, Thomas sat alone in the cafeteria, checking his phone for messages from Mrs. Winters about Emma, and scrolling through news headlines out of habit, still monitoring global situations that were no longer his concern. "Mind if I join you?" Thomas looked up to see Michael Rivera, one of the few staff members he might consider a friend. Michael was an ER tech who'd been at Mercy General for over a decade. "Free country," Thomas replied, gesturing to the empty chair across from him. Michael sat down with his tray loaded with the day's special, something the cafeteria claimed was lasagna, but looked more like layered mystery meat. "Heard Winters is riding you again." Thomas shrugged. "Nothing new.